Why your focus is failing and how to fix it now. Most people ignore this. If attention keeps slipping, the issue is not weak willpower, it is an overloaded system that bleeds focus through tiny, constant switches. The day begins clear and then fragments into alerts, micro-urges, and half-finished tabs that feel harmless, yet drain energy faster than a hard workout. High performers don't negotiate with distraction. They design around it with rules and environments that make the next right action the path of least resistance. Across this series, the plan is simple. Lower noise, lock attention, and convert scattered minutes into shipped results. The target is the next 60 seconds, because momentum compounds when the first move is easy and obvious. Stay with this, because by the end, thinking will feel quieter, tasks will close faster, and resistance will fold under consistent execution. The shift starts now, and it starts with seeing the hidden leak most people miss. The attention tax. You don't see focus doesn't collapse because the work is impossible. It collapses because attention keeps paying tiny tolls that go unnoticed until energy is gone. Every time the eyes flick to a notification, every time a hand reaches for the phone, every time a thought wanders to an unrelated task, the brain must reload the current context and rebuild the mental map of what comes next. That reconstruction costs fuel. Nothing feels dramatic in the moment, yet the cumulative drain is the reason a normal day ends with a tired mind and a half-finished list. The hidden tax is not a moral failure or a lack of discipline. It is the predictable cost of context switching, micro-checking, and fragmented environments that pull attention one notch at a time away from the work that matters. Start by making the tax visible. Sit with a single task and watch for the first urge to switch. It appears as an itch to check one message, a thought to open a quick tab, a micro pause where the hands stop while the eyes remain on the screen. Count those urges for 10 minutes. Most are automatic, triggered by cues baked into the day. The phone within reach, unread badges in the corner, open tabs, lingering questions with no next action defined. When the mind knows the next step, urges drop. When the next step is fuzzy, the brain hunts novelty to escape friction. The tax spikes when friction rises and clarity falls. Design lowers the tax more reliably than willpower. Move the phone to another room during deep work blocks so the default is to stay on track. Pin only the document needed, collapse every other tab, and set a single visual target so the eyes don't compete for attention. Turn off badges and banner notifications for everything that is not mission-critical. Make switching inconvenient, and the brain will stop treating it as a reflex. A small increase in friction at the point of distraction saves large amounts of energy downstream. The goal is not to eliminate all stimuli. The goal is to ensure the main task is the path of least resistance. Precision rituals shrink the tax further. Open with a micro start. Type the first sentence or write the first line of code within 30 seconds of sitting down. Momentum kills hesitation. Use a visible countdown to lock the first 60 seconds so motion outruns doubt. When an urge to switch hits, delay the response for 20 seconds and rest the eyes on the active line. Most impulses dissolve if not rewarded immediately. If an urge persists after the delay, decide deliberately whether it earns attention or belongs on a capture list for later. The rule is simple. Impulse gets a pause, intention gets a plan. Clarity protects attention at handoff points, where most leaks happen. And each work burst by sealing context. Write the last line, bracket the next action in plain language, save the file, and close excess tabs. Re-entry becomes frictionless when the next step is visible without thinking. The brain rewards clarity with focus and punishes ambiguity with avoidance. The more specific the next action, the lower the restart tax. Write it like a command. Send draft to Sarah, outline section 2, refactor function X. Treat ambiguity as a cost center, not a personality quirk. Track progress in the smallest possible unit to make attention pay dividends instead of taxes. A checkmark on a micro task, a line count, a paragraph finished, a decision made. Visible progress produces its own dopamine, turning the work itself into the reward that holds attention in place. When progress is invisible, the brain chases cheaper rewards that fracture focus. Stack the deck by making real progress obvious and easy to claim. The mind will stay where it wins. The attention tax you don't see is not inevitable. It shrinks when triggers are removed, when the first minute moves fast, when impulses are delayed, and when the path back into work is crystal clear. Reduce switches and energy returns. Protect a single track and output climbs. Make the right action effortless, and focus stops feeling fragile. The fix is not to push harder. The fix is to pay fewer tolls and keep attention home long enough to finish what was started. The 1-minute wall. The first minute is the gatekeeper of the entire day. Cross it and momentum compounds. Miss it, and the mind splinters into tiny detours that feel productive but deliver nothing. The brain is wired to conserve energy by seeking the easiest reward available. When a task begins with friction, it looks for an exit. A quick scroll, a harmless tab, a message check. That escape feels small, but it resets attention and raises the cost of coming back. The antidote is to make the opening move so obvious and light that the body starts before the brain can negotiate. Place the cursor where the first sentence goes, put the file center screen, start a visible 60-second countdown, and move your hands. No analysis, no editing, no judgment. Motion first, meaning next. Treat this minute like ignition, not performance. The goal is to outpace the novelty reflex that hunts for easier dopamine. If the hands are moving, the reflex weakens. If the hands stop, it grows louder. Build a ritual that begins within 10 seconds of sitting down. Breathe once. Name the task in 7 words or fewer, and execute the first tiny action. Type the working title, write the function signature, sketch the outline header, drop the first bullet as raw clay that will be shaped later. By the time the timer hits 45 seconds, the mind starts adapting to the direction set by the body. At 60 seconds, the path is already cheaper to continue than to switch. The wall appears wherever there is uncertainty. The brain stalls not because the task is big, but because the next step is fuzzy. Remove that fog before starting by defining only the first micro outcome. Not the whole article, just the opening claim. Not the full feature, just the input validation. Not the entire deck, just the slide title that anchors the flow. Reducing scope compresses resistance. Scope creep at minute 1 is the fastest way to lose the day. Scope focus at minute 1 is the fastest way to own it. Use pressure the right way. A gentle countdown concentrates attention. A harsh, self-critical voice disperses it. Keep the tone like a coach, not a judge. The language matters because the brain attaches emotion to the act of starting. If starting feels like a test, avoidance spikes. If starting feels like a small, winnable game, approach increases. Pair the countdown with a visible progress cue. A growing line count, a character counter, a check mark for the first paragraph, a commit with a tiny message. Each cue says, "This is working. Keep going." Progress becomes the reward that replaces the itch for novelty. Kill optional steps at the gate. Close extra tabs, hide the desktop, silence badges, put the phone in another room, and preload the single file that matters. If the environment offers alternatives, the reflex will grab them. If the environment offers one path, the reflex calms down. Design beats discipline in minute 1. Make the right action the easiest action, and the wall becomes a doorway. When interruption threatens, use a micro delay. If an urge to switch appears in the first minute, wait 20 seconds and keep the eyes on the active line. Most impulses decay if not rewarded immediately. If the urge still stands after the delay, capture it in a 2-word note and return. The act of capturing preserves the idea without sacrificing the start. Protect the first minute like takeoff on a runway. Once airborne, small bumps do not crash the flight. The 1-minute wall is where identity shifts from someone who intends to someone who begins. Do not chase perfect, chase motion. Do not seek certainty, seek traction. The point is not to win the whole game in 60 seconds. It is to start playing so the game can be won. Build a reputation with yourself that the moment the countdown starts, you move. Make that promise small, visible, and non-negotiable. Cross the wall and the next 10 minutes align behind it. Miss it, and the day scatters into tasks that never quite start and never quite finish. The difference is a minute that belongs fully to the work. The strategy switch trap focus gets crushed when the method keeps changing mid-task. The brain pays a heavy toll every time it shifts strategies, even if the goal stays the same. 1 minute it is outlining, the next it is polishing. Then it jumps to research, then back to drafting. Each switch forces a cognitive reboot, like closing and reopening multiple apps on a slow machine. The feeling isn't just distraction, it's drag. Throughput falls, doubt rises, and the work begins to feel heavier than it is. The fix is to pick one strategy per phase and ride it long enough for the brain to lock into that mode. Draft like a builder laying bricks, not like a curator rearranging a gallery. Research like a scout gathering intel, not like a writer second-guessing every sentence. Edit like a surgeon, not like an explorer. When the mode is clear, momentum stabilizes, and the slope of progress gets smoother. The trap often hides inside good intentions. Perfectionists switch strategies because they want the early lines to read clean. Problem solvers switch strategies because they see a better path halfway through. Creators switch strategies because new ideas arrive while executing the old plan. The instinct looks smart, yet it destroys flow by splitting attention across incompatible demands. Drafting and editing use different gears. Exploring and executing use different gears. Strategy mixing is like tapping the brakes and gas at the same time. The car still moves, but the engine overheats, and the ride feels jerky. Choosing one gear is not a limitation, it is leverage. Make the strategy explicit before starting. Name the phase in one sentence, and commit. Drafting means words down fast with no backtracking. Research means gathering sources and capturing notes without forming perfect arguments. Design means sketching structure without polishing visuals. Execution means shipping the next unit of value without upgrading the entire system. When the brain knows the rules of the phase, it stops negotiating every minute and starts working within clear boundaries. Boundaries reduce fatigue because decisions shrink. Decisions are expensive. Fewer decisions, more work done. Protect the phase with a visible constraint. Time box the strategy, not just the task. For the next 30 minutes, only draft. For the next 40 minutes, only analyze. For the next 20 minutes, only clean data. The constraint frees the mind from the pressure of doing everything at once. If a brilliant counter idea appears, capture it in a short note and keep moving. Switching later is allowed, switching now is the cost. This habit converts novelty from a derailment into a backlog that powers the next cycle. Momentum is preserved without losing ideas. Watch for the micro switches that feel harmless, but bleed speed. Changing fonts during a draft, rewriting introductions while researching, bouncing to format a heading mid-thought. These adjustments pretend to be progress because they produce immediate visual improvement. In truth, they are cognitive potholes that break the line of thought and force a re-entry. Strip them out of the current phase and relocate them to the phase where they belong. If it is drafting time, everything that isn't drafting goes to the parking lot. If it is editing time, everything that isn't editing waits its turn. Single-gear work feels slower at first, then it becomes unmistakably faster as the brain settles into rhythm. Calibrate the strategy to the nature of the task. Ambiguous problems need an explore phase before an execute phase. Clear mechanical work needs a checklist-driven execute phase with zero exploration. Creative synthesis needs a collect phase, then a cluster phase, then a compose phase. Analytical tasks need a frame phase to define variables, then a test phase, then a report phase. When the sequence matches the task, confidence rises because each step earns its keep. When the sequence is skipped or scrambled, resistance spikes because the mind is asked to evaluate, imagine, decide, and polish at once. That is not productivity, it is noise. Measure throughput to prove the point to yourself. Count paragraphs drafted per phase, decisions made per analysis block, issues closed per execution sprint. Compare single strategy blocks against mixed strategy blocks. Single strategy blocks win because the brain engages fewer control shifts. The data will show more output with less strain. Once the evidence is personal, the commitment becomes automatic. The question at the start of any session becomes simple. What gear is this, and how long will it stay engaged? When the strategy switch trap is removed, deep work stops feeling fragile. Friction falls because the mind holds one intention at a time. Quality rises because each pass is dedicated to one kind of improvement. Speed increases because the engine is no longer fighting itself. The workday gains texture. Explore boldly, decide cleanly, execute decisively, refine precisely. The identity shifts from a constant optimizer to a consistent finisher. Pick the gear, lock it, and watch the slope of progress tilt in your favor. The latency lock. Attention fails in the space between impulse and action. A notification pings, a thought pops up, a doubt surfaces, and the hand moves before the mind decides. That gap is where focus is lost and can be reclaimed. The latency lock is a simple rule. Insert a deliberate 15 to 30 second delay before any switch. Not forever, Not rigid discipline, just a pause long enough to convert impulse into intention. In practice, it looks like this. When the urge to check a tab or message hits, keep eyes on the active line. Breathe once, count slowly, and let the nervous system settle. Most urges evaporate when they are not rewarded. The ones that remain become visible decisions instead of invisible reflexes. That visibility is power. Once a switch is seen clearly, it can be ranked, scheduled, or dismissed without tearing a hole in the current task. This rule works because the first seconds after an urge are chemically loaded. The brain seeks rapid novelty to conserve effort, not because the main task is wrong, but because it is effortful. By delaying gratification, attention is trained to tolerate the discomfort of staying, and staying gets cheaper with repetition. Think of it as strengthening the brake without slamming it. The goal is not to never switch. The goal is to stop paying for pointless switches that add friction without adding value. Every avoided impulse preserves context, and context is where speed lives. Each preserved context also reduces the hidden residue that lingers after a switch and makes re-entry feel uphill. With fewer ruptures, the line of thought keeps its temperature, ideas connect faster, and execution flows. Operationalize the latency lock with simple cues. Place a small timer or on-screen counter within sight. When an urge hits, tap the timer, keep hands moving on the current task, and let the countdown run. If the urge persists at the end, either capture it in a short note or schedule a micro slot to address it after the current block. If it fades, keep shipping and let the timer reset. This pairing of motion plus delay is critical. If the hands stop, the urge grows louder. If the hands move, the urge softens. The body leads, the mind follows. Over time, urges lose their bite because they stop getting instant rewards. The brain updates the rule. Switching now does not pay, shipping now does. Calibrate the delay to the environment. In high interruption roles, 15 seconds can be enough to separate signal from noise. In deep work blocks, 30 seconds builds stronger tolerance and keeps the groove intact. When true emergencies arrive, the rule still helps by forcing a single breath before action, which reduces errors and keeps the switch intentional. Pair the delay with a visible decision point. Label the switch as one of 3 options. Drop now because it's critical, slot after the block because it's useful, or discard because it's noise. This tiny classification removes the gray area where attention gets stuck second-guessing. Expect resistance in the first week. The reflex to check has been trained by thousands of instant loops. That is why the rule is deliberately small. A short pause is easier to honor than a total ban, and it compounds because it is repeatable. After a few days, the nervous energy that fuels checking begins to flatten. After a few weeks, the delay becomes automatic, like a seatbelt click before driving. The identity shift is subtle but real. Work becomes a series of chosen moves rather than a stream of reactions. The day stops feeling like something that happens to you and starts feeling like something directed by you. Use the latency lock at transition edges too. Before ending a block, pause for 20 seconds to seal the last line and bracket the next move. Before starting a meeting, pause to name the outcome in a sentence. Before opening communication tools, pause to decide what qualifies as done. Each pause is a small investment that prevents large leaks. The result is fewer context fractures, smoother re-entry, and a steadier mind. What began as a delay becomes an accelerator, because protected attention is faster than scattered attention. This is how a tiny rule bends an entire day toward completion. Frictionscape design. Every day is a landscape of pulls and pushes, and most of that terrain was not designed on purpose. A frictionscape is a simple way to see it clearly and reshape it in favor of focus. The idea is direct. Map the inputs that invite switching, raise friction on the ones that don't deserve quick access, and lower friction on the single task that must move now. Distraction wins when it is closer, easier, and more visible. Attention wins when the main path is the shortest route with the least resistance. Start by identifying the handful of triggers that most often steal a minute and multiply it by 20. Unread badges, floating notifications, docked messaging apps, open social tabs, inbox pings, a phone within arm's reach. These are not minor annoyances. They are active gradients that tilt the mind away from the work. Reshape the gradients so the right action becomes the default. Move the phone to another room during deep work blocks. Disable badges and banners for everything except true emergencies. Hide the dock and remove quick launch for apps that don't serve the current session. Collapse all tabs into a saved group and keep only one document visible. Use a full-screen window with a neutral background so the eyes have one target. Pin the current file and preload any resource that would otherwise require a search detour. Place the timer and progress indicator in the same visual field as the work, so feedback is immediate. Each tweak adds a little friction to the wrong move and takes a little friction off the right one. The brain is lazy in a helpful way. It follows the slope. Your job is to set the slope. Design the starting line so it is impossible to miss. Keep a dedicated workspace template that opens to the exact place where hands go to work. Cursor at the top of the document, first line placeholder ready, checklist visible with the next micro outcome already highlighted. If research is required, preload the 3 sources that matter and block the rest behind a later step. If code is the task, open the file at the function where changes start. If slides are the task, open on the slide that needs to exist next. Reduce the number of clicks between intention and action. Each click is a chance to wander. Fewer clicks, fewer chances. Build small speed bumps where you want to say no. Add a 2-step verification to apps that hijack attention, move them off the home row, and require a password after short idle periods. Set messaging tools to batch notifications at set times. Route high-noise channels to a separate profile that stays closed during focus blocks. Put a sticky note on the desk with one rule for the current session, like write 300 words or close 2 tickets. Make the session winnable and concrete. The mind commits more easily to clear, bounded demands than to vague, endless ones. Your environment should answer questions before they arise. Where do I start? What comes next? And how do I know I'm winning? The Frictionscape answers with a visible next action, a single open surface, and a progress cue that moves. If you find yourself hesitating, add lubrication to the main path. Templates, snippets, checklists, autofill for repeated steps, and saved queries for recurring searches. If you find yourself drifting, add friction to the escape hatches. Log out of the tempting app, uninstall the quick launcher, block a site during work windows, or physically cover the phone with a note card that says, "Not now." These small mechanical changes save willpower for the work itself. Recalibrate the Frictionscape at the edges of your day. At shutdown, close loops, seal context, and prepare the next starting line so tomorrow begins with motion. At startup, run a 1-minute audit. Do the visual field and tool layout make the main task the easiest path? If not, fix them before you begin. Treat this design as living. Projects change, roles change, seasons change. The terrain should change with them. The test is simple. If the right move requires fewer steps and less thinking than the wrong move, the Frictionscape is working. With the slope on your side, focus stops feeling like a fight and starts feeling like the default. That is how more work gets finished with less strain, not by trying harder, but by making the right action the easiest one to take. The 2-minute throttle starting isn't about willpower, it's about physics. A stationary object resists motion until a small, consistent force pushes it past inertia. The 2-minute throttle is that force. It is not a productivity trick. It is a start ritual that turns intention into movement before the brain begins bargaining. The rule is simple. Within 10 seconds of opening the work surface, commit to exactly 2 minutes of unbroken motion on the single next action. No evaluating, no formatting, no tabbing out, no polishing. Hands move, output appears, momentum wakes up. The goal is ignition, not excellence. When ignition happens quickly, the nervous system settles, the task feels less threatening, and the next 10 minutes become cheaper than switching away. Build the throttle to be automatic. Preload the workspace so the first keystroke or first stroke is obvious. If writing, type the ugliest opening claim without stopping. If coding, write the function signature and a failing test. If designing, drop the placeholder blocks where they belong. If analyzing, write the single-line hypothesis and list the variables. This is not about correctness, it is about traction. Perfectionism dies under motion because it cannot keep up with speed. After 2 minutes, the brain recognizes progress and aligns with what the hands are already doing. The inner resistance that felt heavy a moment ago loses its leverage. Keep the constraints tight so the ritual stays repeatable. A visible 2-minute countdown, a clear micro outcome, and a clean surface with one target. Treat distractions like turbulence that passes if the plane keeps moving. If an urge to tab out appears, acknowledge it and stay with the line. If a fresh idea interrupts, capture it in 5 words and return. The throttle works because it removes negotiation. There is nothing to think about, only a tiny promise to honor. The promise is small enough to keep on the worst days and strong enough to pull bigger work behind it. Remove frictions that stall the throttle. Put the phone out of reach. Close the extra tabs. Hide the dock. Turn off badges. Place the file dead center with the cursor ready. The mind defaults to the easiest available action. Make the right action the nearest action, and the throttle fires reliably. Pair the ritual with a micro reward that marks the start as a win. A checkmark in a visible tracker, a commit labeled started, a quick log of lines or minutes shipped. The point is to teach the brain that beginning pays immediately, so it stops seeking payment elsewhere. Use the throttle across transitions. After a meeting, before reopening communication tools, run a 2-minute thrust on the most important task to reclaim the thread. At the start of the afternoon, when energy dips, run the throttle to get over the drag. When returning to a complex project, re-enter with 2 minutes on a tiny piece rather than scanning everything and drowning in scope. The ritual shrinks re-entry cost because it converts overwhelm into a single, doable move. Once motion exists, clarity follows. Scale the throttle without breaking it. 2 minutes is the non-negotiable minimum. If momentum catches, extend to 5 or 10, but never raise the minimum on paper. Keep the bar low so it stays a doorway on hard days instead of a hurdle. The identity built here matters more than the output of any single throttle. You are someone who begins on command. That identity compounds into trust. Trust becomes consistency. Consistency becomes results. The 2-minute throttle is a small hinge that swings a heavy door. It defeats the novelty reflex by outrunning it. It dissolves resistance by moving while the mind is still waking up. It converts the first seconds of a session from doubt to delivery. When this ritual becomes automatic, focus stops being a feeling to chase and becomes a sequence to run. Begin fast, stay light, and let momentum do the heavy lifting. The noise purge attention doesn't fail only because of apps or habits. It fails because the senses are flooded. Every color blast on the screen, every icon in the periphery, every hum and ping forces the brain to filter before it can focus. The noise purge is a 1-minute reset that strips away sensory competition so concentration feels quiet again. Start by collapsing the visual field to a single target. Full screen the document, dim the brightness to a comfortable low, and switch to a neutral background that doesn't vibrate for attention. Close floating widgets, hide toolbars, and remove any preview panes that show thumbnails or message counts. When the eyes see less, the mind spends less energy deciding what not to look at. That energy returns to the task in front of you. Then, mute the auditory layer. Silence non-essential sounds, switch devices to Do Not Disturb, and remove background noise that carries language, because lyrics hijack verbal processing. If silence feels harsh, choose a stable, low-complexity soundscape that fades into the background and masks unpredictable spikes. The goal is not a perfect studio. The goal is a predictable sound floor that stops tugging on attention. Pair this with a micro-breathing cue. Inhale, hold briefly, exhale longer than the inhale. One slow cycle tells the nervous system it is safe to stay. Calm physiology makes calm cognition possible. Clean the workspace in the literal sense too. Put away items that signal other projects or unfinished obligations. Visual reminders of unrelated goals act like open tabs in the mind. Keep only the tool of the current task on the desk, keyboard and screen for writing, notebook and pen for planning, code editor for building. Everything else can wait in a drawer or behind a closed lid. You are teaching the brain a simple association. This surface means this action. Repetition strengthens that link until focus becomes the default response to the setup. Next, simplify the input pipeline. Disconnect auto-refresh where possible, stop live feeds that update mid-session, and turn off quick previews that flash new content at the edge of vision. If work requires reference material, pull only the pages or snippets needed into a separate static window and keep it parked. Dynamic inputs drag the eyes away and reset thoughts. Static inputs support the flow without stealing it. If you need to keep communication open, set a defined check window and keep the indicator hidden until that window arrives. This single rule removes the drip of micro-interruptions that shred attention before you notice. Use a 1-minute checklist to make the purge reliable. Light down, full screen on, single file open, all badges off, sound stable, body grounded, timer ready. Run it fast, like a pilot before takeoff. The ritual matters because it replaces guesswork with sequence. After a few sessions, the purge becomes muscle memory, and the first minute produces the same outcome every time, a quiet lane for deep work. The urge to switch still appears, but it lands on a surface without easy exits. Friction rises where you want to stop and falls where you want to continue. If the environment cannot be controlled, build a portable purge. Use noise-blocking earbuds, a focused desktop profile with minimal icons, and a minimalist editor theme that reduces contrast spikes. Sit with your back to movement, not facing it. Choose a seat with a wall or neutral view rather than a corridor of motion. Even small changes to angle and line of sight cut visual collisions that split awareness. On mobile, hide the home screen grid during work blocks with a focus mode that shows only the essential app. The fewer invitations the senses receive, the fewer invitations the mind accepts. The noise purge is not about becoming a hermit. It is about removing unchosen stimuli long enough for attention to knit itself into a single thread. When the field is clean, thinking accelerates because it stops fighting interference. Words line up, logic tightens, and creative leaps appear because working memory finally has room. 1 minute to collapse chaos into a clear lane is a bargain. Do it before every deep session. Do it again after interruptions. The sensation is unmistakable. The world gets quieter, the task gets louder, and the next right move becomes obvious. Context. Sealing focus leaks at the edges, not the middle. The moment a work burst ends, the mind drops the thread, and the next entry feels uphill. Context. Sealing prevents that loss by locking in the exact state of the task before stepping away. End every session with 3 moves executed in one flow. Write the last line as if handing the work to your future self. Bracket the next concrete action in plain language, and close anything that doesn't belong to the very next step. This tiny ritual reduces re-entry friction to near zero because it eliminates questions. There is no "where was I?" only "do this next." That clarity lowers anxiety and kills the hidden avoidance that turns short breaks into long detours. Treat the seal as part of the task, not an optional extra. The brain loves closure and resists vague endings. When you bracket the next move, you convert ambiguity into instruction. Send draft to review, build the query for metric X, outline section 2, fix null check in handler. Specificity matters because the brain stores cues more easily than intentions. A vague note like "continue later" forces you to reload the full mental model next time. A precise next action lets you skip the reload and go straight to execution. This is how minutes stop dying at the doorway and start compounding into output. Design your workspace to honor sealed context. Keep a single file open, position the cursor at the start point of the next action, and save with a label that tells your future self the current state. Use short factual labels like draft v2 ready for examples or data cache cleaned cache needs cache visuals. Leave a visible breadcrumb at the top of the file with a date-stamped note so the brain sees the path without hunting. If the work spans multiple tools, link those tools inside the note and make sure they open to the right screen. You are creating a runway that allows immediate takeoff the moment you return. Protect the seal during transitions. Before checking messages, run the seal. Before a meeting, run the seal. Before ending the day, run the seal. The rule is simple. No transition without a sealed context. This prevents mental drag from open loops that follow you into the next activity. It also reduces the chance of picking up the wrong thread when you come back because the right thread is literally waiting for your hands. Over time, the ritual becomes automatic and re-entry becomes the easiest moment of the entire process. Capture stray ideas without breaking the seal. If a fresh angle appears as you close, write it under a short ideas header below the next action. Keep each idea to a single line to avoid reopening the thinking mode. This preserves creativity without sacrificing closure. If a dependency blocks the next move, bracket the smallest unblocked step so momentum is still possible. Waiting on an email does not mean the session must halt. There is always a preparatory move available. Draft the template, outline the section, set up the test. Use a quick end-of-day sequence to stack tomorrow's wins. Seal the last task, open tomorrow's top file, bracket the first action of the morning, and place the cursor where the first keystroke goes. Put a small note on the desk with a single sentence that names the priority. Morning, you should not negotiate with a list. Morning, you should execute a decision already made. That handoff from present clarity to future action is the essence of context sealing. When you return, do not browse or scan. Read the bracketed line and move your hands. Let the ritual carry you before the mind reopens every option. The more often you honor this handoff, the stronger the association becomes. Ending equals sealing, returning equals starting. The identity shifts from someone who restarts slowly to someone who re-enters at speed. The result is a day with fewer hard starts, fewer lost threads, and far more work completed with less strain. Seal the context, save the momentum, and watch resistance fall away. The distraction budget. Attention collapses when novelty is treated as the enemy. The urge to check will not disappear. It needs a limit and a lane. A distraction budget gives novelty a controlled outlet, so it stops hijacking the middle of real work. Set a daily allowance of intentional checks and label them before the day starts. 3 to 5 slots is enough for most roles. Name them clearly: midday scan, afternoon admin, end-of-day sweep. Each slot has a start time, a fixed length, and a single purpose. During a slot, handle messages, browse saved links, clear minor tasks, and scratch the curiosity itch without guilt. Outside the slots, novelty requests are captured, not consumed. The brain relaxes because it knows relief is scheduled, and the pressure to sneak micro-checks declines. Make the budget visible to turn it into a game. Use a small card or note with 3 empty boxes. When a slot is used, mark a box. Empty boxes signal runway. Filled boxes signal you are done for the day. This matters because ambiguity invites just one more loops that shatter focus. The budget turns novelty into a measurable resource. When the last box is marked, you're out. If something insists on attention, weigh it against the cost of breaking the rule. Real emergencies qualify. Boredom does not. This tiny layer of accounting detaches emotion from the decision and protects momentum where it matters. Shape the content of each slot so it doesn't bleed into deep work. Batch by channel and difficulty. First, clear quick responses that unblock others. Second, process notifications and archive noise. Third, move one small administrative item that would nag later. Avoid opening threads that require heavy thinking. If a message demands real analysis, capture it as a task for a focused block and leave it alone. The budget is a pressure release, not a second job disguised as a break. Ending a slot with a clean inbox and a single queued decision is better than ending with a half-solved problem that follows you back into the main task. Tie the budget to the clock and to transitions. Run one slot after a significant deliverable as a reward that doesn't derail the next push. Run one before lunch to clear mental residue. Run one near the end of the day to prevent evening drift. The rhythm teaches your mind that novelty has a safe home. When novelty has a home, it stops breaking into your work. If a slot is missed, don't double it. Skipped checks are savings, not debt. The goal is to meet real needs with less leakage, not to feed an open loop of compulsive scanning. Track the results for 1 week to personalize the numbers. Note how many times you felt the urge to check, how many slots you actually used, and whether your main output rose. Most people discover they need fewer slots than they thought, and that each slot gets faster as batching improves. If 3 is too tight for your role, use 4. If 5 turns into grazing, cut back to 3. The distraction budget is a scaffold, not a cage. It should feel firm and generous, not rigid and punishing. Pair the budget with boundary cues so others understand your pattern. Set a status that indicates focus windows and reply windows. Let collaborators know when to expect responses. This closes the social pressure loop that often fuels sneaky checks. When people know you answer at set times, they stop nudging in between. Your reputation shifts from always on to reliably on time, which is healthier for both attention and relationships. The power of the distraction budget is psychological as much as procedural. By allowing novelty in designated spaces, you stop labeling yourself as weak for wanting it. The shame that drives secret switching disappears. What remains is a clean agreement. Ship first, then check. Use novelty as a reward, not a reflex. Over days, the budget retrains the nervous system. The default becomes steady work punctuated by brief, satisfying scans, not constant scanning interrupted by attempts at work. The result is a quieter mind, clearer progress, and a day that ends with both focus delivered and curiosity honored. Conclusion: ship quietly, win loudly. The game was never about perfect discipline. It was about building a system where the right move is easier than the wrong one. Across this journey, attention stopped being a mystery and became something that can be directed at will. You saw how invisible taxes drain energy, why the first minute decides the next hour, and how switching strategies kills momentum even when the goal is clear. You learned to pause impulse long enough to choose, to redesign the terrain so the main task is downhill, to ignite with 2 minutes that defeat inertia, to quiet the senses so thinking can breathe, to seal context so re-entry is instant, and to give novelty a lane so it stops breaking your flow. These are not hacks. They are small, repeatable constraints that return control to your hands. Now it's about stacking them until results become inevitable. Pick one important task. Purge the noise. Run the throttle. Cross the 1-minute wall. Lock latency when urges poke. Stay in a single gear until the phase is done. Seal the context before stepping away. Spend the distraction budget on purpose, not by accident. Repeat this loop twice today. The win is not loud. It shows up as a calmer mind, a shorter path to done, and a quiet confidence that the next session will start fast and finish clean. That identity shift is the real prize. You become someone who ships, not sometimes, but daily. There is no need to wait for motivation to arrive. Create it by moving. There is no need to trust willpower to hold. Replace it with design and sequence. There is no need to fear interruptions. Meet them with a pause, protect the thread, and resume from a sealed start line. These moves make progress predictable. When progress is predictable, ambition becomes practical. Projects that felt heavy begin to feel inevitable because the system carries you when mood does not. Start now, not later. Open the work surface and give the next 60 seconds to the task that matters. Let motion lead and let friction do its job on everything else. Ship quietly today so wins can compound loudly over the next weeks. The scoreboard that counts is built in private. Steady sessions, clean handoffs, fewer leaks, more finished work. Keep it simple, keep it small, keep it consistent. Attention follows design. Output follows attention. Build the system and watch the results take care of themselves.